Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast. Today I was lucky enough to interview Liz from FleaMarketLoveLetters. Liz is incredible. So in this interview, Liz will be telling us all about why she collects letters and tell us more about her letters. I found Liz on Instagram and I thought it was so interesting that she had this collection of letters that were written, I think, back in the 1800s, and many of them are also in the early 1900s and mid-century. So I thought this would tie in well because the Denim Couch Podcast is all about telling stories about the past and hearing about what life was like back then. And yeah, interviewing Liz was such a pleasure. She and I get really giddy about this type of thing, talking about the past, talking about the collections that we have. And sharing these stories with each other was really fun. She says here on her website, check it out at FleaMarketLoveLetters.com. She says, collecting for the Flea Market Love Letters Archive Project began in 2015. The present mission of the project is to archive and preserve found vintage ephemera, letters, postcards, photos, etc. So like she said, she visits flea markets and collects and preserves these found letters. Liz has a lot of passion for this project, and you can tell that she is just so excited about this project. It means a lot to the community that she has brought together. I really love this because I think it's so important. History is just so important for many reasons. I think the audio is really important. I think the photos are important, and the letters are important. These letters are just, to me, they're another piece of the puzzle of what life was like back then and restoring those memories and those times. And one thing that you'll hear later in this interview that Liz says that is that people are people back then and now. But one thing's for certain, human connection is always important. And I posted earlier, I feel like we have to fight for human connection. I don't think this was as much of a problem back then. And so I'm fighting for connection. I like to familiarize myself with these decades and what people did right in these decades and try and apply that in my life and others' lives and communicate that. The only difference is I think it was a little easier. They weren't bombarded by the busyness of our time, overwhelming amount of choices that we have. So with that, I'm so excited for you to hear from Liz from Flea Market Love Letters. Who doesn't love a love letter? Anyways, we're just going to dive right in. Here's Liz from Flea Market Love Letters and I's interview. Enjoy.
So, I started my interest in letters in 2012. I was always a bookish kid. I have a degree in English. I love reading. I was very fortunate that I came from a home that encouraged sort of quirky collecting. So it was, Saturdays and Sundays in fields somewhere. I'm from Pennsylvania, in fields somewhere, like digging through cigarette boxes of old photos for a nickel. Like that was my form of entertainment. So in 2012, I was at a flea market in New Jersey and my mom had given me $20 to kind of leave her alone. I was in high school at the time and I spent it on nothing. Like I spent it probably on 2 or 3 things. And then I came up to her and I said, can I have $5 more? And she was kind of annoyed. So I blew through the money so fast that she wanted to see what I wanted. So she came over to the table with me and it was a shoebox and it was full of yellow paper and it had a sign on it that said $5 letters. So she immediately, being a mom, saw this as a golden opportunity for me to sit down and shut up. So she bought it for $5 and was like, the whole car ride home, she was telling me all the stuff I could do with them. She was like, oh my God, you could take them all out and put them in order and read them and make a book out of this, and you could write a short story and all that kind of stuff. And when I got home, one of my best friends came over. We used to, like you do when you're a kid, you spend entire days together. She came over, and this is so, remembering all this, we walked to a CVS and we bought a bunch of like clear sleeves. My dad gave us a bunch of old binders from his office, and we just spent like 2 or 3 days organizing these letters. And these letters were from 1926, and they were from a highway patrolman to his girlfriend. So they're the Raymond and Marie letters. They aren't up anywhere yet because there's so many of them. There's like 70.
Wow.
But they're the first ones. So they started it, and I kind of carted them around with me for a long time. I didn't bring them to college. I went to college outside of Pennsylvania. I went to school in DC. So I brought them sort of to a professor once, and I was like, what do you think about these? And the professor, as academics tend to be, was like, I have my own 10 projects going on. Figure out what you want to do. So I thought, okay. And they went back on the shelf. And then I graduated college. I got a job where I was working a lot of off hours and on hours. I was traveling a lot for work, but then I was also home for 3 months at a time doing emails. So I just started reading the letters because I was basically, bored by myself at home. And I had collected more and more random ones. And that was when I started putting them on Instagram. So in 2017, I put them on Instagram, and I had no idea what I was doing. First off, for anybody who's interested in this, I only took photos of the envelopes, which are arguably the least interesting thing. So like the first 70 posts on my Instagram page are just envelopes. And it's one of the reasons, and I'll talk a little bit later, but it's one of the reasons that a series I'm doing in December is going to be like a day in history sort of thing, because the page has grown in community, and those original posts have 3 people who've ever seen them, and I think 2 of them are my friends and one's my mom. So like I love that. There's quite a few letters that people just don't scroll down to. So in 2017, I started posting them there, and it was pure envelopes. And then I started posting them to Tumblr as well, because I really liked the sort of ability to auto schedule them. And then in 2019, I decided I had over 200 letters done. And by done, I mean typed, posted, shared out. And I realized that, Tumblr was probably not the best place to be hosting them anymore, because it could go in an instant. It could, just disappear.
Yeah.
So I set up a Wix, and I stumbled through that, and that's where we are now. So I have about 300 letters spanning from, the earliest I have is from 1879, and the latest I have is to the 1960s. So I have about 15 different authors in those collections, and then I have about 30 individual letters with absolutely no context as well. So I'd say I probably have almost 500 letters that need to be done still. But there's one series of I just did a series of a love triangle, which I hesitate to kind of use the word love triangle because they are real people. And it made it, a lot of questions that I get are sort of, and I don't get them publicly. People will sort of privately message them to me. Like, do you ever feel weird publicizing people's personal letters? I've had family members before say they're not interested in the project because it makes them uncomfortable. There's different reactions to it. The thing that I would say is I'm not a genealogist. I'm not interested in tracing the families. If ever a family member of one of the deceased of the authors came to me and said, can you take my Auntie Betty's letters down and can I have them back? Boom, they're gone in an instant. They're in the mail. But I find sometimes there's a weird place in the community online where people are either like detectives and they want to find the people that the stuff belongs to, or they just want to sell it. So I'm in a middle place.
Interesting. I think a lot of your audience too, obviously, is, more like me, where we just enjoy the fact that we're able to, share these, you're able to share these with us.
Oh, the whole point of what I do is community. So being able to take someone who has been deceased for 70 years, but at the time they were writing this letter was, 27 years old and was in, Spain as a soldier is the most important thing to me, is the idea you were saying, like, they're everyday people. They are everyday people. And the majority of letters I have are guys in the military, incredibly vulnerable for the time that you think of, like the macho men of the 1940s. And these are guys who are begging their sweethearts that if they're going out on the weekends to not kiss other guys. And that's just crazy. You see this like pouring out.
One thought I had is, I just feel like we only get these stories from our grandparents or the older generation, if we even have them still. So I think it's so cool to hear from average people who experience everyday life. We hear from the celebrities or the famous people back then, which is still interesting to me, but I find the average Joe even more interesting for some reason.
Yeah. One of the things that I'll say to that, because I think that's probably what keeps me interested in the project, is that there is no I don't know the people's starts or ends. Sometimes I'll have people, since the page has grown, in people, like I said, the detectives, I'll have people DM me all the time and they'll say, oh, I looked up the address and this is a picture of the house, or I took your picture and I darkened it so that you can see their features more. And that's great to me, like that the community comes together and does that. And I love those moments. But there are just other times where I get asked, like I was saying, does this not make you feel uncomfortable? There have been times in letters where there's one I can think of where it was between a husband and a wife, and she was basically describing their intimate time together, and I decided not to publish it. I just decided not to publish it because I thought, if this was, like I was saying earlier, they sort of become voices in your head and they become real people when you spend the amount of time that I spend with them. And I was like, damn, Betty, we don't need to be like, ooh. So like, but then you also have to remember that like she was writing this for her husband. So like there's a lot of parts. So the rule of thumb I have is that if I wouldn't post it on a friend's Facebook wall, I won't put it on the internet for even someone deceased from 70 years ago. Like there are the things I've cut out of some letters. Oh, there was a lot of pregnancy scares. I'm going to tell you that. And you see these things and you're like,
so good.
You're like, I'm going to cut this part back just because maybe, you're going to haunt me and I'm not into that, but like, here we go. There's the coded language that kind of got used in the 20s and the 40s is really interesting to me. It's the sort of stuff about like guys, it pops up all the time in the letters. If they're based near, because they're generally in the military, if they're based near their sweethearts, it's usually like, I really enjoyed the drive last night. Your hair was so soft. And that's kind of like, you're getting the vibe from what's going down. But then there's other times where it's just so blunt and so literal. And you're like, oh, all right. Well, clearly we were a modern household.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah. I like I said, I have almost 500 letters. It's some of them are just grocery lists, and then the other times you're like, whew, okay. It's honestly, there's one series I just did that'll go up in, I don't even want to say January because it could go up in October of next year.
Yeah.
But it'll go up in 2020, and it's fairly interesting. It's a med student. He's from the 40s. And he's it's not from the 40s. He's from the 30s, right as World War II starts. And there's a part in one of the letters where he's writing to his sweetheart from a different township, basically. And he's saying, mom, dad, and his brother were listening to and basically declare war on the radio. And he said, I could hear it from upstairs and I didn't want to go downstairs. So I just stayed in bed. And like, that's such a wild thing that it's the 19th, but but also the vibe for it wasn't like the way he was writing wasn't, I was so sad. It was just bed was more comfortable, which was ridiculous to me. Like I was sitting there, I was like, he's just putting it's just the simpleness of jotting it down, but the significance of it. And that's a letter series where a pregnancy scare comes up, and it was a fairly dry series. Like it was very, I woke up this morning, I played poker with the guys, I went for a bike ride, I'll talk to you tomorrow series. And then suddenly it just goes like, I woke up today, I'm sure you'll, won't be pregnant tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, all right.
Wow.
Because you never have the partner's letters, very rarely. There's only one instance in which I have the response letters, and that's that story. That's the three people, the love triangle, the Betty, Jack, and Henry, and that's almost more heartbreaking because Jack dies. One of the people in the community found sort of his army records, and they found the time and the date and the place and all that sort of stuff of when he dies, and all of Betty's letters are returned to her unopened. So I actually bought that letter series was bought for me, I should also say, because they'll be listening to this. A lot of these letters, letter collecting can be very expensive. So I have a lot of support of people who are out and they'll be at a flea market and they'll see a bundle and they'll pick them up because they know, oh, this is that really weird thing that Liz is into. So I'm like, okay. So like for my birthday one year, my partner bought me like $50 worth of letters, and I was like, this is a done deal. We're doing great. But this letter collection, the Love Triangle, was bought in New York, and it was bought in 2 batches. So 5 letters were bought, and I was sort of asked because they were a bit expensive. So I was asked to sort of read through them. And I knew from one of the letters that he would die, basically. I didn't want to read them. I have felt always very awkward about sharing them because they are the most personal that I've read and done. But I also knew that there were about 30 other letters sitting in some shoebox somewhere that I had access to that I couldn't separate these 5 from. So it meant a lot to me to be able to tell Jack's story, and one of the letters sort of that I'll send on to you is his last letter that I have. So he obviously doesn't know what's going to happen, but it's sort of the last letter that I have from him in that series, and very rarely do I sort of know what happens to them afterwards, but I knew for this series, so it was intense.
My darling, aren't we the perfect couple? It seems even our thoughts run the same. We just go well together. You know why I'm saying this. Well, because in your last letter I got this AM, you mentioned about seeing Mr. Miniver, which I had already seen, and wrote you asking you to see it. Isn't that funny? And we both enjoyed and liked it. Yes, hon, it sure was a beautiful picture throughout. Also about Anime and Ralph, it is foolish how they carry on the way you say. Ye gucks, they both could see how very, very fortunate they are that they can see each other at all. You're the real little trooper, keeping so happy and all the way you do. And yet we both feel plenty sad at heart. If anyone should go around feeling sorry for each other, we should. But there's a war going on for our own freedom, and we're both sensible enough to realize that in order to keep this freedom, these hardships have to be endured. Betty, you're so sweet and dear, and so brave and sensible. I love you, you previous darling. You're everything to me. I wonder if Ralph and Anime ever think of how our hearts are straining for each other. If I stop to realize I most likely won't see your beautiful face before me until the end of this war, I almost go crazy. But my only consolation is yet in the fact that I know you'll still be there when I go get back. I've been operator at Control Ground Communication Trailer for the last few days. Really interesting. I'm on radio all day with 4 hours sleep and then on all night. My job is keeping communication between plane and operations office going. You should see how busy I am receiving calls, typing them up, and transmitting to them. Filing reports to give operations officer. Whoever is on duty in ground shack has full charge during time there. At first, every time a call would come over, my heart would do loops because I was afraid I wouldn't get all clicks and switches and frequencies set right to receive and transmit and all. I really have learned plenty in practical operations here. We fly our operations in Douglas Cargo Transport when on flight orders, or in Grumman's 2-place plane on postcard in our live bomber. A plane just like that is flying overhead as I write this with one wheel stuck in retracted position. The other is down but won't come up, so he's using up his gas for a crash landing. A fire truck, ambulance, and hot mamas, asbestos suit sailors, are out on the line. I think he might fly it out into the bay instead of into the paved field. He's talking over what to do over radio now. He'll be quiet while using up the gas. Time is almost that well-known hour of taps, so I'll be rolling into the old sack. Believe me, I'm dead tired. We are all in the same condition. We are drawing big fur-lined leather flying jackets soon with our rate and name and squadron in gold print on leather piece over our left breast pocket, just like ones in our flying picture. I won't start flying until next shift again, which will be when we go off. It won't be very long now. Good night, sweetheart. See you in the morning. Keep well and happy, and always wear that cute little smile of yours till I see you again. I love you, dear. Always and forever, your own, Jack.
So about a year ago, you may find this anecdotally very kind of funny. About a year ago, I moved to Ireland, and I brought letters with me, which is absurd. I'm sitting on my living room floor right now, and I have 6 binders of letters from basically 1901 to like 1945 sitting around me in Dublin. Like this should not be a thing. But when my partner and I first moved here, I brought them with me, and I continued working on Flea Market Love Letters while I was in grad school, and it was a really great release to sort of just come home and work on the project. And then I went back to the States for the first time, and I exchanged the letters that I had there. So the way things work now is I tend to bring over a series or 2 at a time, because I travel back every 6 to 8 months. So I bring a series or 2 at a time. So any given time I'm in Dublin airport, on my back I probably have about 20 to 40 letters, which is crazy to go through security with, because I just feel like everyone else is taking out iPads, and I'm like, don't touch that binder. Yellowing World War II letters in it. I'm just like, I have a framed photo in my house. I also do found photography. I collect found photography. And I have a framed photo in my house of a woman washing dishes with her cat, and the back of the picture says, Rita talks to Kitsy while she does the dishes. I bought it for $1 at a New York flea market. My landlord came in August to kind of, in Ireland you would have a lot of visits with tea and cakes and things, and he sort of came to catch up with us, and he asked, he was like, this is a very unusual photograph. Is this your grandmother? And I had to be like, no, it's a literally complete stranger that I have in a frame.
I would do that. I could do that. So yeah. I have this vision, because I have all my found photographies back in the States. I have this vision of, I call it our forever home, but when I find my forever home, like I'm going to have a gallery wall of Polaroids of just complete strangers. And for some people that like weirds them out entirely, but thank goodness that like my partner is someone who's like, okay, but I'm just going to like, can I keep my comic books on the other? And I was like, you put comic books everywhere as long as I get my dead people wall. That's all I want. For some reason, I feel like I don't want all of this to be lost, you know? So I'm so happy when, you share the letters or people share these photos with other people. Because I hate all this just being lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really beautiful way to kind of frame thinking about this. And it's something that I have to constantly remind myself of the purpose. And like I have a notebook for organizing sort of my to-do list and things with the page. And I have like the top 3 things are community, preservation, and just driving home that point that, people are people in 1920, in 1944, in 1962, that people are people. And making sure that it's done respectfully is a priority for me.
I love that. That's so great. Wow. I love that too. I think that's one of the things I've been searching for in doing this is just, I do think of, people from the past as like, oh, they had this completely different life, which in some ways it was, but you're totally right. And I do think the letters make you see that more so than the photos, even though people are originally attracted to the photos more so.
Yeah, part of me, I think you might agree, just feels a sort of responsibility to do it. I'm in possession of them, and I'm so repetitive about Community, but people got so attached to Betty, Jack, and Henry, which is one of the reasons that I want to draw their attention back. The first series of letters I ever did that'll get drawn back to next month is it's a GI and his war bride from England. So the letters from the 1940s are her writing him basically to like get the forms for her to come to the States to marry him. So there's a real sort of sense of desperation in them because he's proposed and then gone back to New Jersey and she's in war recovering England. And there's a series from 1919 that I went to the house. So there will be a series where that was incredibly, I'm not a very spiritual person, but God, that was intense. Standing on the front steps, I was like, this is a lot. And I hadn't even read the letters at that time. I was just kind of like, this is I had an envelope anyway with the whole thing. And that'll be up on the blog eventually, but that was one of the reasons that I didn't want to put it on the blog. I guess my kind of first favorite letters are the letters that that my mom bought me that summer at that flea market, just because of the fact that they started all of this. But the kind of quote that I think I'll leave you with is one of the first letters that I put on the account is from the War Bride series. So she is the War Bride with her fiance. They're fiancés at this point. In 1940, I have it in front of me, 45, they're fiancés. And then I also have letters from the summer of 1953, where she goes back to England with their two daughters. And it's the first time she's seen her family since 1945. He stays in New Jersey. She goes back with the daughters and spends the summer. And it's actually, it's the summer that Queen Elizabeth gets her coronation. So her Sandy, who's the author of the letters, her mother is one of the seamstresses who does the curtains and things for the coronation carriage. So it's the everyday history of it is kind of the most incredible. So I'll just I'll give you 2-3 lines from a letter dated from December 20th, 1945, and this is Sandy to her soon-to-be husband, but her sort of fiance at the time. And she says, "I may as well tell you that you've attained the position of honorary pinup boy of the Wolverines Club. You've been that for almost 4 months now, and they think that you must be a dream, just an expression, by God. Every time they pass our picture, they howl, 'Hubba, hubba, Harry boy.' Really, you should be extremely flattered, but don't let it go to your head. We're really all nuts." And that she's in a letter where she's basically begging him to send her the form so she can give it to the U.S. government to come back or to go to the States forever. She also tells him that he's the honorary pinup boy of her office. So I think there's Hubba Hubba Harry boy is a pretty good one.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, that's good. Oh, she's a hoot. That lady.
Sandy's got it all. Sandy is the one who they exist in the archives, but they don't exist on the internet. Describes her basically her empty bed, and you're like, all right, Sandy. It's a strong way to feel. Okay.
Oh, she's so entertaining.
The letters have taught me mostly the importance of keeping records. So I would have kept a diary when I was in high school. And I sort of fell out of the habit when I went to college because it was very much, it wasn't cool to be journaling your feelings. So I lost track of that sort of narrative side of myself. And I think that what we experience in not having handwriting, but doing everything over text is you really don't know what your own voice sounds like in writing. You sort of parrot who you're talking to. And I think that the thing the letters have taught me the most is the importance of keeping a written record, but also taking the time. Like I wrote some thank you cards this morning for a lot of stuff that's been happening, and I, sent them 3,000 miles all over the world. But I sort of sat down with the letters, and rather than saying thank you so much for the birthday card, it was very nice, I said thank you for the birthday card. It's been a beautiful couple weeks, but I'm very happy doing XYZ, and I hope that you're doing well. And they've influenced really a lot of how I communicate. And I hope that others are able to adopt and fall in love with these guys like I have, because I would love somebody to just sort of to live in this world with me that these guys give me. So I love community, and I love that.
Yeah, and I really like that perspective. I haven't heard that in a long time. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think people need to hear that. So.
Well, you do very important work. So what you're doing is, the fact that you're getting to generations before we lose them, is hugely important.
It's cool that the written, the photos, and I think the audio I just want them all preserved in some form. So.
Oh my God, I'd love to hear what my people sounded like. You've no idea. I have them in my head, and then I'll listen. I did for Valentine's Day. I did a Spotify playlist about songs that got mentioned in letters for the last 2 years. So it's a lot of you must remember a lot of popular hits from the 40s. So I basically I was listening to it while I was typing up the Betty Henry and Jack letters. And Sam had to ask me to stop talking in a 40s dialect, because I'd be like, "Come here, sugar," and he was like, "Okay, you need to remember, we live in 2019."
Awesome! Oh, I love that. You're so cool. Isn't she awesome? You can just tell she's so excited about what she does. We have so much in common. The friendships that I've been able to make from doing this project, I'm bewildered. Also, can you believe Jack's story? If you haven't yet, you should definitely go to FleaMarketLoveLetters.com and check out the rest of the story from Betty, Jack, and Henry, because it's it's pretty intriguing. Quite the love triangle. I've written my own love letters. Boy, is it so different than texting. There's a lot more thought, a lot more time. It takes a lot more time, takes a lot more thought. It's almost a lost art. And how cool is it to hear these stories from these people back in these time periods? Can you believe that she has almost 250 letters archived and has many more that have not been archived? So what a fun hobby. Not many people do this. It was such a pleasure to chat with her. She's over in Ireland, which is actually it's not one of mine. It is my favorite spot on this earth. So it's beautiful. I hope she's enjoying it there. And yeah, thanks for listening to the interview. So for today's embarrassing story, this is truly humiliating, and I might have to be careful what I say. So let's start off. The family and I had a wedding, which I mentioned in last week's episode, and we came back home from the wedding to find that one of our dogs was missing. So we have 2 dogs, and they're brothers, and one's very timid and shy, and the other is crazy wild and very energetic, loves attention. They're polar opposites, and of course, the energetic, attention-loving one was gone. And so I'm in hysterics, and the rest of the clan is trying to figure out where the dog is. It was a Sunday night, so we were able to find a business card in our garage, which was a cop card. So a cop had been at our house this weekend, And so we call that number, and the lady doesn't know much about the visit other than a cop was here. They checked on our dogs, and it was noted that everything was fine, which made no sense to us because one of them was still missing. So then the next day, we're still trying to figure it out. We locate him at the pound, or I actually should say the animal shelter, and he was there. And so the plan was to go pick him up later that day. Monday comes around. I'm home from work, and my neighbor knocks on my door and begins to tell me the story of what happened with my dogs while we were gone. I should preface this with my dogs were fine, except for they weren't. But we've done this before. The dogs have an entryway outside, so they get to hang out in the garage and then have their doggy door and can go outside and do whatever they want and come back inside, and there's plenty of food and water for them. We've done this before, and everything has been fine until this time. My neighbor comes to tell me the brown dog had escaped from our house in our yard and spent a couple days with her. Saturday afternoon, they got a little worried, called the cops, and the cops came over and searched our house. The funny thing is that she told me there were 6 cops at our house. 6 cops. Are you kidding me? The whole neighborhood was watching to see what was happening. So she was standing out there with my dog. 6 cops had to check our house, and the whole neighborhood is outside wondering what's going on. So if that isn't one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, I'm not sure what is. So anyways, she decided to take the one dog to the pound. We ended up getting our dog. He got his shots, and, $100 and something bucks later, he was back home. He has the funniest little mugshot I've ever seen, and he's been a little sad because he was having a great time at the pound with all the other doggies since he loves attention. Now I've got to go around to all the neighbors' houses with plates full of cookies to tell them we're not crazy. And lesson learned, we will never be leaving our dogs without parental supervision. Anyways, thank you for listening. Have a great week. I am so excited for next week. We are diving into the 60s. We've got a whole new color scheme. We've got a whole new photo shoot, a whole new arrangement of guests, and a whole new decade. So stay tuned. The lady that we'll be hearing from next week is a hoot. I know I say this about everyone. Seriously, she speaks her mind, and we love her for it, and she's hilarious. So enjoy your week. See you next time.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health. So like checklist items for habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items. And if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, and check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yeah, we neglect so many of these habits daily. And I do feel like, if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health. And yeah, trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice and I would love your input. So what would you guys like to know?